How's it going, everybody? I love the expressions of woo when I ask how everyone is doing. Like, that's how I want to do this in every interpersonal interaction now. Somebody just comes, hey, Tony, woo! I am so thrilled about this. This is my fourth PAX, but my first time moderating a panel, so I'm very excited today. Ready to talk about some reminiscing about the good old days and the days of now and how we are going to be using nostalgia in video games. But before we do that, I'd like to introduce you to our lovely panelists, our brilliant panelists, who will describe a little bit about themselves, get some shameless self-promotion from them, as well as give us a memory of nostalgia, something that's very fond to you. So I'm going to put up the names here with all of our Twitter handles. And y'all already know. Who would like to start?
James starts.
Okay, it's tradition. So, greetings everyone. Howdy. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. It's Saturday. How we doing? So my name is Dr. Shane Tilton. I'm Assistant Professor of Multimedia Journalism at Ohio Northern University, which is in Ada, Ohio. Oh, that's fancy data. Go Polar Bears is the correct answer. I wasn't expecting that. That's a little weird. All right. So I'm here. Yes, I do typically research in games and specifically how they're used in the classroom for pedagogy. My background is in social psychology, and my first memory, I guess we're going to go with that statement, of playing video games is with an Atari 2600 for Christmas in, I think it's 83, 84, and playing Combat against my brother and beating him royally. Good memory, good memory.
Good one. Yeah, I'm racking my brain. I think I got one. So I'm Dr. Ryan Kelly, I'm a psychologist in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah, all right, sweet. I'm also the co-founder of Geek, It's a media company that fosters being unapologetically enthusiastic. We try to provide an inclusive community for geeks, nerds, dorks, to be able to express themselves, showcase their passions, and these things that make us flourish and excel. We talk anything psych, science, and geek-related where they kind of intertwine. I've done research on how to use video games to improve social skills, both making them and using existing games. And I'm the co-author and illustrator of the first Aspie superhero comic book. Oh, and my nostalgic memory. Okay, so raise your hand if you've heard of the Atari Jaguar. Not bad. All right, so I remember my brother and I played Raiden Project in the arcade all the time, and we loved this game. So we really wanted to play it at home, but there was nothing that had the power to play it, except for these wonderful moments where we didn't quite have the technology, but a company would be like, let's make something anyway, it's just gonna be garbage. So that's what they did. Atari was like, let's make the Jaguar, which was quite bad. But we were able to play the Raiden Project, and we played for hours, but that's not even the game that was nostalgic. We had a game called Hover Strike. And it was such trash. Like it was supposed to be like this 3D, like sci-fi on a planet tank shooter, right? It was so garbage. But again, that's kind of the point of nostalgia, is it has these rose-colored lenses. We're out playing with my brother, we had a lot of fun, and we're like trash talking this thing at like 9 and 11. Oh, never forget, weird. But at that age, and so that would be my
Well, I'm Dr. Sarah Hayes, and I exist both in 2D and 3D. I sent a cardboard cut it up myself to PAX South because I had FOMO.
She ended up as a kite.
It's a different story for a different day. So I am the co-owner and the lead clinician at Save Point Behavioral Health, a geek and gamer-centric private practice located in Seattle, Washington. I'm also the content manager for Take This, a mental health nonprofit that encourages and educates people about mental health and the support of it in gaming spaces in the gaming industry. And then I write books and do things and do panels, so yeah, that's me. And my favorite, my nostalgic moment actually happened recently. I'm not going to talk about my first experience, but I'm going to talk about a moment of nostalgia when I pulled out the original Xbox 2 weeks ago to play DDR. Specifically, the second remix edition. And first, I couldn't get the pads to work. But then I found the little dongles, and then my HDR fancy TV doesn't hook up right, so I had to use a bunch of converter boxes, and I only got black and white because there was no like color hookups all the way. But I will tell you, playing that thing and hearing that intro song was the most like pleasing and satisfying thing that happened for a very long time because of it. It was great. DDR's amazing. Yeah, can't go wrong.
This sucks. My name is Dr. Rachel Kowert. I am the research director of Take This, which she just introduced. If you don't know what Take This is, we're a nonprofit mental health organization. We run the AFK room right up the hall. If you haven't been there, you should check it out. It is eerily quiet, and it's full of coloring books, so you can't go wrong. My nostalgic memory, the first like flash that came into my brain was Dragon Warrior. And little Taloon, he was so kind, and just with his little knapsack. It's my childhood.
That was good. I like that. I am Dr. Anthony Bean, and I am the executive director of a nonprofit down in Fort Worth, Texas, called the Telos Project. And we provide psychological assessment and therapy to geeks, gamers, and pretty much anyone that comes in through our doors that needs some sort of mental health help. And let's see, where do I want to go with this? I am the editor of an upcoming book with two of these things. They are also editors.
Two of these things.
Things like this.
Yes.
And I am also the writer of Working with Video Gamers and Games and Therapy, which unfortunately are gone, and the editor of this book, which is Legend of Zelda and the Psychology of It. And we have them here, so if you want one, I'll be out there after. Is that good? Oh, nostalgia moment, yes. All right, so we're getting really bad at this, guys.
We are, yeah.
Yeah, we are really bad at this.
I warned y'all before this was going to happen.
He did. I would have to say that my best nostalgic moment is actually Ocarina of Time, is when you get out of the village in the beginning, and you go and you see the owl, and like, dude, why are you here again? This is stupid. Get out of here. I want to play the game. And then it expands upon the entire horizon of the game, and you realize that like, this game is huge, and you're like, I'm gonna get into so much trouble for my parents for playing this game too much, which I did. I was grounded lots for Ocarina of Time.
Can I do a trivia real quick? Sure. All right. So I'm gonna ask something, and if you answer the question correctly on my Twitter, I'll give you something. Maybe a signed print of Max Gamer or something like that. But here's the thing. A 2D fighter, if you can identify the song and just tweet it to me, then you'll get it. I'm gonna give you part of it and then just hum it. 2D fighter. I'm gonna take you dun 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 dun. Anybody have any idea? Okay, cool.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
That's beautiful.
You're welcome.
By the way, I'm Emory, Dr. Emory Daniel. I am an assistant professor at Appalachian State University in the mountains of Boone, North Carolina. So I'm actually happy to be in the city right now. It's not often. I have a lot of research interests, one being in particular about streamers and as well as their chat rooms. So if you are a streamer or a content creator on YouTube or any other platform, we would really like to talk to you. We are conducting focus groups in the AFK room at 7:30 and 8:30 tonight. So if you have some time, we're going to be talking about toxicity in chat rooms as well as privacy issues. So I have a tweet on my Twitter, so on Fuzorodoc, and it has all the signups. So if you've got some time, we would really appreciate it. The whole idea is to create a better and safer environment, especially for new streamers that are just getting into the process. So we're really trying to get some published work out there. So if you got some time, please help us out. We'd love to talk to you.
And keep in mind, if it's not going to be data collected through him, it's going to be data collected from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, and they're going to give us like game disorder publication. Just little guilt trip.
It's not us, it's them.
Go to his thing.
I was going with shameless plug, but that'll work.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
Can we do one more shameless plug?
Sure.
So Rachel and I are actually doing a study too.
We'll get to
right
this.
now. Yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get on gaming behaviors, and we're gonna get to the panel. Don't worry, we got that. And it's on our Twitter feeds. So if you guys want to take a study on video gamer, social identity, and a couple other fun things, hit us up on Twitter. The links are up there on multiple cases, and if you don't see them, tweet at us, and we will send you the link.
Any other announcements?
No.
Okay, nostalgia.
No, Dan.
So the thing I want to mention, and we all want to talk about here, is nostalgia really goes hand in hand with video games in general. We were at the Zelda panel for the 20-year anniversary of Ocarina of Time, and one thing that came up a lot was, I have nostalgia for this memory. I have nostalgia for that memory. It could be an audio cue, it could be something in gameplay. Nostalgia came up a lot. And so it's interesting that we always talk about it with video games, and as Dr. Kowert and I have talked about, media in general. So, but I feel like there is a bit of a overuse of the word, not knowing what you got a very Inigo Montoya. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means with nostalgia. And so I really want to get the opinions of those in the field that study this kind of stuff. And what is nostalgia specifically?
Do you want to pull up this slide?
I was looking at you specifically, but
Cool.
This is,
Here we go. So let me ask you a question. Show of hands, who views nostalgia as something positive? Yeah, that's why you're all here. Out of curiosity,
I
who
would
views it
either
as something?
somebody.
Right. Yeah, you go into the exhibition floor and like, this instant nostalgia. Raise your hand if you think it's something negative. It can be, right? Sure. So actually, nostalgia originally started off as something negative, like a pathology, right? You sort of think Odysseus leaving Ithaca, leaving Penelope, and then distraught with homesickness, missing his child, just wanting to get back. Nostalgia was largely used almost like a diagnosis for Swiss soldiers who are away from home and were so homesick and missing their families that they just perseverated on that and become incredibly anxious and depressed, which can happen. But actually, the way we view nostalgia now, and actually originally what it meant in Greek was nostos, which is like return, and then now it goes to suffering, so it's return to suffering. But now in psychology, we actually view it more as an adaptive skill. It's this thing that, we have this fading affect bias, that as time goes on, good memories linger longer, and bad memories, say trauma, tend to go away. So we have this rose-colored lens. I mean, again, Jaguar Atari is trash, and so it's hard to strike, but I remember only the good, and I think we have a lot of that. So it's an adaptive thing. It's something where we can develop a continuity of self, and we can go back and see how we were where we used to be, the strengths we used to have, instead of focusing on all the mistakes we've made, and it empowers us to move forward and become who we want to be. It's something that when we feel lonely or sad, that's oftentimes when nostalgia is triggered. You can actually trigger it by having those feelings. And that's when nostalgia comes. It reminds us of a time where we felt socially connected. We get that feeling. Most nostalgic memories actually are when we were around other people we cared about greatly, and we were the protagonists of that, which kind of sounds like video games, I think. And nostalgia is very unique to video games, and here's why. It's almost think about we want to go back to a state of being. Almost if we could just time travel back to something that we enjoyed. And with standard memories, we can think about it, and we can certainly be mindful and remember the details. With video games, as we remember, sort of going through the story as if we were Cloud, as if we were Link, as if we were whatever, we can literally just time travel and revisit that state, the exact interactions that we had with Tifa. We did a Final Fantasy panel, so I'm kind of on that mode. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. The Titus laugh. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, a good one. I'll just do that over and over in this panel. So we can go right back to it, and again, it gives us a sense of what we might call vicarious social connectedness. Tifa's not actually my friend, but I get that feeling. So again, something adaptive, incredibly cathartic, a very good coping skill, and honestly something that we would view as a resilient trait. And then the last point of, when we're talking about internal things like loneliness and sadness triggering, well, the things that trigger it in our environment are senses, right? And the two top being smells and sounds, right? And when those come it can trigger. And I want to do one, I'm just curious, and then I don't know how old people are here, but I'm going to do this, so just raise your hand if there's maybe a slight bit of nostalgia. Crossfire, you will get caught up in the Crossfire! Yeah, good. All right. Okay, next.
I really do think.
I'm going to end on that, yeah.
Gosh. What'd you say?
It's gonna end on that?
Why not? You'll get caught up in it.
I'm just thinking that we have to go after it.
Try. Let's go. One thing I think I really enjoy from what you were just saying here is this whole idea of what you see on the screen here, sort of almost these parasocial relationships that exist. So if you don't know what those are, they're one-way relationships, and we have them with many characters, whether they be your actual avatar or people that you talk to within the game. And I do think within specific games, I mean, we talked about this when we were doing The Legend of Zelda, the psychology of The Legend of Zelda, a couple of different packs, this idea of identity formation and how we can use nostalgia with identity formation in terms of how we project ourselves on an avatar. And Dr. Bean could expand on that quite a bit, so I'm going to toss it over to him.
As you can see, there's a lot of stuff on this slide. I'm not gonna have time to go over all of this. We're gonna do some fun stuff. All right, so the idea of nostalgia, as Dr. Kelly was so, I'm looking for the right word. Doctor. And we're talking about is the idea of like a homecoming and a pain, a yearning for something in the past. And when we experience video games, something that we've grown up with, I'm thinking of Adventure Island that's popping up, and that game sucked. It sucked so bad, but I still have it. And every so often I plug it into my NES, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna fail at 1-3, but you know what? I'm gonna enjoy riding that skateboard until that egg hits me. And I'm thinking, this is who I am. Skateboarding, caveman, throwing little guys, things where I don't know where he keeps them, just keeps on throwing them. But anyway, so the idea of nostalgia and identity formation is the games that we choose to play, the things that we grew up with, they become a part of us. They be the identity of the character and how we played it, the memories that we gathered from those games. They have an impact upon us. And with that impact, it helps us understand our self-concept, which is how we view ourselves and how everyone else views us as well. Those are two different types of it. So everyone here has what we call self-concept, how we view ourselves, and then there's how everyone else sees us. Everyone here probably identifies as a gamer or has a love for games. That's an easy self-concept to understand here. But if someone else is on the outside, they might see you guys as a student, as a teacher, as a brother, as a sister. That's a different type of concept that you have for yourself. The idea is that comes out of lots of different variations of our lives, our ethnicity, our religion, our professional abilities, where we go in life. And those things form that concept, that identity. The same idea works for the nostalgic ideation of how we view the games that we play, but also things that we choose to experience. And when we think of those memories, those fondness, we have that little yearning, it's like a little tightness in your chest, like, oh, that was so good, that was so great. And then you go back and play and you're like, this is crap. And you're like, gosh, this was so good, but it's so bad. It's like watching a movie from the 80s right now, and you're like, this is the best Volcano. That's the best one. You're like, this guy is slowly melting in after jumping into the lava, and you're like, that is terrible. It wouldn't take that long. He wouldn't be able to stand. That's the type of nostalgia for those types of movies.
How many times have we come up already in this panel for something to the effect of, I played this game and it's crap. I hate it already, like 3 times we've already mentioned this. And I think it's a theme. Many people, when we talk within the gaming communities, always use this idea of nostalgia as almost a bad thing. Like we're too reliant on it when it comes to game development, when it comes to playing. It's only because you have fond memories of it in the past. I mean, this is me playing The Lion King on Sega Genesis. Did not age well. It doesn't. It doesn't.
I would hard disagree. I think that aged super well.
I've got a copy. You want it?
Is that?
I've got a copy.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Are you going to tell us the Tasmanian Devil on the Genesis?
No, that's Aladdin also
Yeah.
held up. Okay, no, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. Good.
Can I just counteract?
That's the negative part of nostalgia. Him.
Please.
I fade from the mirror.
My counter argument is, and I was just thinking this, is you must have been right. You were just right there.
We got that ESP.
I think it's because technology is so quickly evolving that one of the first things we recognized, despite the fact that we liked it, was that it's so different. Like, even with like thinking of the games that we so embraced and thought were the coolest and the graphics were the best. That was so smooth. Like, I remember playing Super Mario 64 and being like, wow, this is like real life. Right? But now,
That triangle's really ahead.
I mean,
This is exactly how we look, right? And now, but at the time.
the undiscovered lesbian in myself was very confused by Lara Croft's pointiness. Like, may I say?
Me too.
But I think it's about the evolution of technology, you know, and so we look back and not only are we assessing like the quality, or like if you look at movies with really great special effects, like some of the Star Wars films, because they did things literally right there with literal objects, it's harder to tell, versus like old CGI, it's obvious and it's painful to watch, even though you loved it as a kid. So I think part of an extraneous factor, Doctor, would be the evolution of technology.
I think that's a really good point. In fact, we even have a term called pain and transition. That's usually when nostalgia occurs, right? So in technology is a big part of it. When we're young and new, everything's so new and exciting, we're developing new memories. And then as we're getting older, we become reliant on those, and new technology starts to come in, and we kind of like the stuff that we had memories with and was comfortable, and now we think we have to learn. And so everyone handles that differently. I think most people in here are able to balance that with the nostalgia of Super Nintendo. The big one for me was the Final Fantasy VII cutscenes. I remember those being so real. And then I watched it again, and it's like glorified polygons. No way. This isn't right. This isn't the real thing.
I think that's one of the reasons why we always get really excited when we see an HD remake of one of our games. Is because we're like, oh yeah, let's bring this into the graphics. I mean, who's seen Ocarina of Time in one of the updated video games? I'm blanking on the name right now. The different graphics generators.
3DS? The remake on the 3DS?
Yeah. Unreal Engine.
Thank you.
That stuff looks insane, and I'm like, I would play this again, like 8 times again, right now. But you can't, because it's not out there. It's sad.
Yeah, you bumped me out.
I'm still waiting for the HD remake of Shining Force 2.
Oh, that would be great.
So now we talk a lot about the negatives and nostalgia. Now, one area I want to look at, and this is Dr. Kowert's area, which I love hearing her present because she always talks about, let's get away from addiction, let's get away from violence, let's look at some positives within gaming. And I really think we need that as a community right now. So she is going to tell us about nostalgia and well-being.
Yes, nostalgia is a psychological resource. It is bittersweet. We saw a few differences in the hands being raised about whether it's a positive thing or a negative thing. It's bittersweet because it's bitter because we can't go back to it. The cutscenes in 7 are never the same as they were back then. And it's sweet though because it brings us all the warm fuzzies and positive feelings we have about playing together and experiencing the game for the first time. So there's 2 different kinds of nostalgia. We're talking about it a bit as kind of this overarching concept, but it can actually be subdivided. The first is restorative or historical nostalgia, and this is the kind, I like to say, is the kind like my parents have. Like you wish for a bygone era, like when life was simple and, you know, the soda fountain or whatever. Now this kind of nostalgia actually has detrimental effects. It's kind of a negative psychological resource. It's associated with meaninglessness, loneliness, and there was another like very negative word, it was hopelessness. And those are like, not being exaggerated, like that's what it's associated with. And the reason for this is because we can't go back to that era. You're wishing for something that will never be. Now when we're talking here about video game nostalgia, we're talking about reflective and personal nostalgia. We're reflecting on a specific memory that we have positive feelings about, and by tapping into that memory, we experience that whole list and more of positive outcomes. It can counter feelings of loneliness, mostly because these memories are social memories. It can make you temporarily a spark of happiness. It can increase confidence, self-esteem. I'm too short to read the list. Inspiration and optimism.
You wanted the notes. You
Yeah, the
wanted the
C
notes.
leans backwards. Excuse me. So I feel like a lot of times people just talk about nostalgia. It's almost like a marketing ploy, like what the Nintendo, when the Nintendo came out in the small version, right? They sold 3 million of those in 2 months. And sometimes I feel like people jump on the bandwagon like, oh, we'll just make anything in pixel art and we'll tap into that nostalgia. But it's not a superficial thing. Like being able to relive this nostalgia, tapping into this nostalgia can have a wide range of short and long-term positive psychological benefits.
How'd that PS remake go?
The PS remake?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. Did they make it?
I thought they made it.
Yeah. I got the
They
Super
definitely did
Nintendo
make
one
it.
because
I thought they made it, but I didn't
Yeah.
think it did nearly as well as the Nintendo stuff.
Right.
It's just, yeah, it was like about a third or fourth release.
And also, they were talking about the old games that are crap. Dragon Warrior holds up. I don't care what you say.
Stop.
Yeah.
I do want to shift gears for a minute here and get to a little bit of the practical aspects of nostalgia. And one of them in particular is talking about need satisfaction. And this is rooted in a lot of theory that talks about how we can use this not only through our experiences in gaming, but also how to create games as well. So Dr. Tilton has a few things to tell us about need satisfaction.
And I'm glad we've been talking about memory and weaving it through this, because before I get to the idea of needs, there's kind of the idea of what nostalgia represents, and that is, according to Michael Foucault, it's the language of memory. It's basically how we intertwine our experiences and give it a voice to something from the past and allow us to relive it. And it kind of goes to the idea of the past self versus the current self. So the one, since we're talking about good and bad games, I gotta think of E.T. from the Atari 2600. Well, considering I've replayed it not that long ago, within the last 2 years, and as my wife has given me, it's good. It's something. It is something that allows you to play forward. And I think what I want to get to, the reason I mentioned the E.T. game is because there are some needs that are met by this. One is the knowledge. So in terms of the traditional uses gratification literature, there's ideas called cognitive needs, which another thing I mentioned, and I think before the panel, is how did we know the Konami code? If you think about it, the Konami code came from the 80s. It was used for Contra. How many of you know the Konami code? Give me a thumbs up. What's the Konami code?
Down, left, right, B, A, select, start.
That was in unison. That was incredible.
Part of his past. That might be my favorite.
Yeah.
I knew I had my people here. My people were supporting me, so thank you. But how did we know that? And I think what happened is, what was that? Nintendo Power. So you had the person that had the Nintendo, had the person that had Nintendo Power, and they knew that information, and that gave them an immediate sense of control. There's also the idea of the affective needs. It's the emotional component. I remember being Bowser for the first time in Super Mario Brothers, the first one. So it allows you to have a logical use of the needs, the emotional use of needs, and there's sort of the personal creative needs. It's basically, I'm the first person to own an NES, or I was the first person to own a Nintendo 64. I'm really getting into Nintendo for some reason, I don't know why, so I'm pitching for them.
Hashtag not a sponsor.
Not as fun. And we brought that in, outstanding. But there's also the social needs. It's basically that I can hang out on a Thursday with my friends. We're done with school. We can go, no matter what was happening, we would go to my house. We would play with the two controllers we had. We would play, we'd do Super Mario Brothers. We actually had a power pad, so we could do the super track and field and run once in a while. Yeah. As I keep getting reminded, I was part of the upper middle class as a kid, so that's right. And the other thing that's sort of like working with friends is the tension release. So I really failed that test in 6th grade. The math was horrible, but you know what? I know I can beat these characters. I know that if you put me in The Legend of Zelda, I'm going to get through all the dungeons. Now, framing those past self-needs, there's the present self-needs, and specifically, how do we understand what happened in the past through the development development of these. So why do I need to buy that new 25th anniversary of NES? Or why do I need to buy a sword from the showroom? Well,
Which does have batteries.
it does have batteries in it.
Not very good ones.
No, and it's not very loud either, but
Which is also nostalgic.
it makes sense. It would be what I would buy too. So it would be, essentially, I looked at there's four components of nostalgia that we look at in terms of the relationship between the present and the past, and that is the achievements. Specifically, I know that I've achieved these successes in the past. Can I still do this? I can play through Legend of Zelda in the past. Can I still beat all of the 9 dungeons? And there's just the enjoyment. It's the memory of enjoying the games sort of from the guys. So even if the games weren't good, and I'm going to use a tabletop game, Mousetrap.
Don't talk poorly on Mousetrap. That was my favorite board.
That is a great game. I loved it. I played with my brother. We would try to build it. Sometimes the Mousetrap didn't function right, but we enjoyed it because we were together and we were in a family building this contraption, which was amazing. We could build anything at all within our family, but that was something that we could do and work together. And then there was the parasocial interactions, which Dr. Daniel has mentioned before, but there's also the social status. I own, I think as of right now, everything but 2 of the old 2600 Atari 2600 games because those were stored, and that is because my wife has stored those with me. So we have these components that we actually focus on that allow us to translate the present self to the past self and speak the language of memory through these interactions.
I can't get over that sword. I'm gonna be honest. And I really, the one thing I think about when I look at that sword is the thematic elements when we look at games like The Legend of Zelda that have been going on for decades. And let's think about that for a second in terms of series that have been going on for years and years and years. And one thing that I'm interested in, and particularly within Zelda, talks about how the formula is made. So this is what a lot of YouTubers talk about when they're analyzing the game development for particular Zelda games. It's the formula, go and save the princess, go through a bunch of dungeons, that's it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm quoting Seinfeld there. But then Breath of the Wild changed everything. And they did everything differently. And so again, this development started to move in a much different way. And there is a psychological premise that deals with this. And I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Hayes for expectancy violation.
Yes. And so expectancy violation is a concept that is rooted in communication studies, but basically, when you go on a blind date, this is what happens when your date is different than what you thought they were going to be, either better or worse. And so expectancy violation is basically where to look at the actual written definition. It's a violation of expectations, which are sometimes preferable to confirming your expectations. So basically, it's about what we anticipate out of games and then what they end up being. So I have a lot of feelings in particular with this about Kingdom Hearts. We're going to swing back to it in a couple of minutes. No,
This is getting a touchy subject
What's
here.
that? We'll keep going.
Just,
Let her go.
I'm not going to violate your expectations, Ryan. And so when we think about game remakes, I know you were talking about what do we think about when we do game remakes? I don't know about you guys, this is probably gonna date me, you're probably gonna figure out how old I am because I say this right now, but Viva Pinata, when I booted up that rare replay, yeah, see, I don't hate all the good games. It was glorious, and the music was no different, which was great. That was a piece of that nostalgia that made it for me. But the graphics were wonderful. You could see every little piece of paper mache, and it was great. But then also there's some trueness to the original games, like I'm mentioning with the imagery or the music. But then also we kind of expect a little bit something different. Sometimes maybe there's a nod to the old game, maybe with a weapon. I think about Borderlands, and they do all kinds of nods to different fandoms, different games. There's some outfits or colors look more advanced than others, and so there's ways that they weave it in with the new remakes that nod to the classics. And so then the thing that I'm sure most of us here are aware of is when fans are expecting something new out of a line or a series or a remake of a game. There are incredibly high expectations and very strong opinions. So, for me, Kingdom Hearts.
Woo!
I played Kingdom Hearts as a young person. I played the first one and the second one. I ate them so quickly. It was exciting. I love Final Fantasy. I love Disney. So it was just like, yes, this is amazing. This is the best of both worlds. I use Sora and the characters and the concepts in Kingdom Hearts all the time in therapy with my clients when it's applicable. But like, Kingdom Hearts 3 disappointed me, I'll be honest. I felt like my least favorite part, and I forgot about this, and it was kind of nostalgic in that negative, painful way, returning to the suffering of flying the stupid ship between the planets. I just don't care to do that, or fix my ship so I can actually fight. I fought like 2 of the bad guys by the time I beat the game, I'll be honest with you. But some of them were nostalgic. Like I enjoyed visiting the new Disney worlds. I enjoyed those things, but I mean, even Dr. Kowert and I today were talking about how like we wish there was a bit different of a balance between how much story development happened. I mean, Final Fantasy side is kind of a loose and fast way to describe it, but on the Final Fantasy side versus the Disney side, let alone, and sorry, that'd be fighting words, but I think they jumped the shark a long time ago with way too many games taking us off down that side tangent that they had to wrap so many things up in the 3rd game. And this is not to say that I don't love Kingdom Hearts, I love it. I mean, my gamer and geek adjacent partner looked at me very funny when I was playing Winnie the Pooh, where I was trying to get the most puzzle fruits in a row, and she was like, this is an adult game? this is a thing adults play? And she was able to like justify, well, you played this when you were young, so you're just following up. This is nostalgia, that's fine. And I told her, don't judge. I'm gonna play what I want. I'm just gonna boot up Viva Pinata again. And so in the gaming community at large, I think that it's important to note that with those high expectations, we communicate a lot, far, wide, and loudly about the things we expect and why they fail us or why we're excited about it. And knowing your own opinions and knowing those things makes that such a rich discussion. But another thing that happens is that we try to prevent that expectations violation. I think about this often when we talk about the psychology of children and why they watch movies over and over and over and over and over. I watched The Lion King and cried at Mufasa's scene every single time.
Spoiler.
It has been 25 years, sir.
So.
I didn't say that, you spoiled it. But I watched that over and over and over, as I'm sure many of us in this room did, because children's brains don't like surprises. They like to learn and become experts in content as they grow. So we want to know what we're walking into, and this leads into adulthood when we enjoy like ratings of movies or honest trailers. I think about The Escapists, Zero Punctuation. Like, I will watch that sometime. This is entertaining, but like, it's good to know kind of what other people think of it, for better, for worse, because it gives you perspective on how you might approach the game. But I also encourage you to, not that I'm going to take a position on this, because I think all kinds of nostalgia are important, all feelings are valid. I'm going to step out of the therapy chair now. But it's good to be aware of kind of what you're anticipating and measure your expectations and be open-minded to what's coming next, because people work really, 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 really hard on what you're about to play. Just give it a fair shot. I mean, you still don't have to like it by the end. I still didn't like Kingdom Hearts 3 the best out of all of them. I would certainly say Kingdom Hearts 2 is probably my favorite, but that's a conversation for a different time.
I almost immediately think of ukulele when it comes to when I sat there and said, they've tried really hard. And I like the game, I mean, but it really was one of those areas of nostalgia where we wanted it to be just like Banjo-Kazooie, and it just didn't hit that mark with a lot of people. Not until they started doing patches for it, and really started to lean back into it a little bit. But
But can I say, whose
Yeah.
fault is that? Who expected it to be Banjo-Kazooie?
And this is the dichotomy we're dealing with here, is
Yeah.
that we're talking about our demand as audience members, or are we talking about the development in terms of creative content? You know, and this is a perfect transition about where do we go from here? What is it that we do as far as audience members, as far as developers? I'm really interested from your expertise in terms of what is our future direction by using nostalgia. What can we do to improve, to use it, potentially avoid it in future game making?
Well, I think going back to the idea of the language of memory, when we look at nostalgia in games, we can't just have a simple reflection. It can't just simply be a retelling of the story or a retelling of the information. We have to know, essentially, what are the experiences that we were having while playing it, as an audience member that's going through the game, as a developer that's going through the game. And not necessarily have to be perfectly faithful, but knowing what the memories we're going to take away from those games are. So for Legend of Zelda, we're talking about, the reason Legend of Zelda works very well is because that story is complex enough for that time that doesn't feel disappointing. We can look at it from different perspectives. Other games, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that video games do really well now are build characters, build relationships, and capitalize on emotion, right? So, and we know that through nostalgia, the ones that tend to be most nostalgic are the ones that we have such an emotional connection to. So when we see people having a nostalgic experience, there are three primary areas of bringing that light up. One that is largely just in control of thoughtfulness, right, in the prefrontal cortex. The other is the limbic system, which is our emotional center, right? And when those are formed, it's, am I getting too, okay, good.
Just over here, sorry.
And then, but what we see is the interplay between those as a memory is developed. The amygdala puts this wonderful coloring on top of it, and that's the thing that makes it nostalgic. And so we know in video games, like, include emotions, like genuine emotions, and that's something that can make video games more nostalgic. And then also to include not necessarily merchandise, though I spent thousands of dollars on collectibles. Yeah, well, good collectibles though that maintain value and appreciate over time with signatures and so on. Not that thing that I is trash. So that was harsh. That was harsh. But including, you know, the same type of songs, the same type of imagery. I mean, again, those are things that as we see those, we view them kind of as extension of ourselves, right? Of when we were younger, Thundercats, like the Thundercats symbol, right? That's not just a symbol, like we remember who we were when that symbol was important to us. Yeah, that's right. Or music, like I remember, I think it was Breath of the Wild, where they don't play the original Zelda song yet, right? Like the main instrument. It was only until like a really poignant scene that I can't actually remember, where just really slowly it's like.
When there was a memory, it's Latmos. It's basically Link's theme throughout the game and how it's being implemented, right? You hear it through most of it. You hear it through some of the memories.
Yeah, right. And it's like you get those are the goosebump moments. Like, oh yeah.
Are we doing Scott Stapp again?
They all joke that they'll never know if I'm actually having a stroke or not. It's a fair point. Yeah. Anyway.
I think that one of the things that they also bring up is the concept of it building upon each other. For Kingdom Hearts 3, I don't think they built really well off of the other games as well as they could.
I didn't. There was so much story. They developed a rich story in that series. A very, very, very rich story.
I think they lost their ethos in 3 a little bit. Whereas, like other games...
Strong opinions, guys, I'm telling you.
They're very strong opinions. Whereas I think other video games and such, obviously my favorite is Zelda, I think that they continuously build upon it, the storyline. They look at it from a different angle. They change it around just enough to make it new. And she's giving me eyes, guys. This is going to be bad. And like even with the music in Breath of the Wild, you can actually She wrote the music chapter in this book here. He actually went and looked at the actual music and actually saw that from the first Zelda game, you can actually see callbacks to it based on the music, and they just change it ever so slightly to make it just a little bit different, but just enough there to pull you into that moment of getting that spine-tingling sense of your goosebumps going up on your arms, and you're like, holy crap, I'm about to go kill some beasts, and this is going to be great, guys.
Speaking of beasts.
You can talk about Mufasa again, because I don't think we really
No. I wanted to mention too, like when I think about nostalgia and expectancy violation, all the things we've been discussing, I also think about like, because this extends beyond video games obviously, I think about Harry Potter too. And like the new Fantastic Beasts movie. And that, yeah, there's a lot of opinions about that one. But if you just take the movie in isolation, if you step away from what you expected, if you step away from all of the things that you hold dear and near to your heart, with all the other Harry Potter stuff, with Nude, with everything, it's not a bad movie. It's a good movie. But it's just because we expect so much out of it that it doesn't check all the boxes that we wanted. But I think it's really valuable to step back and keep an open mind and step into the curious, as said the first master supervisor I had when I was getting irritated working with sex offenders. Curiosity pays off in spades. You learn things that you didn't expect. So in a much less heavy and depressing context, step back into the curious with video games. Step back into the curious with your media, and you might be surprised with what you find.
It's interesting that within that particular comment, I remember watching a con with the creators of Game of Thrones, and people were saying, "You're ruining the books. You were ruining everything about that story." And George R. R. Martin, I believe, was like, "No, they are not. You know what? And you know why? Those books are still there." And the first time I heard that, I had a real epiphany moment that, oh my goodness, he's right. These are two separate entities. But guess what? You can enjoy both. So I'm the person that likes the Harry Potter movies and the books.
But on the disappointment side of things, Stephen King has hated nearly every film made of his books. So I mean, there's still attachment there.
They're still great books. They just can't end them.
I mean, the technology to simulate what he was writing about wasn't there for a long time. I mean, just saying. You can't get that kind of ooze with CGI at that point. Now we could. Now we can. That's why we're seeing a push. I'm gonna step off the Stephen King train. Still, hashtag not sponsors of any of the media we're discussing today.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I want to pivot slightly to the development of games. I think a challenge in future direction is don't just like throw pixel art everywhere and expect that we're just going to buy it because it draws into our sense of nostalgia. You can't just remake everything and hope like that's what's going to pull it in. I think about, so Final Fantasy, just at the panel. 6 is my favorite, and they remade 6 for handheld, right? And all they did was just 6 with some cutscenes. No, I don't want that. I want you to remake it on the Unreal Engine. So it's not just, I feel like sometimes they're just like, we'll just remake everything and it'll be great and we'll all love it, and that's what you were talking about. There's a difference between the little bits of nostalgia that they pull out as they build on the Legend of Zelda franchise, and that is what really works, instead of just saying we're going to take Final Fantasy VI and add some strange cutscenes like randomly throughout the storyline.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. Although I don't think it worked for Shane and his sword.
You're not proving the point.
You're not helping the cause at all.
So we've got, about 10 minutes left? I'd really like to open it up and have it, our panelists, and we've got microphones in the middle there, so if you don't mind talking within the microphone there, we'd love to answer any questions that you might have. And then after the panel is over, we are going to be just outside, so if we don't get to your question, fear not, we'll be more than happy to talk with you about anything you're interested in.
Go ahead.
So you guys mentioned the crap. It's slipping from my mind now. When you're nostalgic about something and you're having expectations of it.
Yep.
That can also, I've noticed, at least from Toby Fox, if anyone here was Undertale. But when he was making Deltarune, he had to make it very clear, like there was an announcement, it's even in Deltarune the game, please don't expect too much from me. Undertale was a great hit, so it's affecting him as a developer. Is that also really common?
You know, there isn't too much research out there in that arena yet. But I would say that when I think about that kind of a concept, I like that he's the kind of person to be very on the nose. He's very skilled with both in play, you can see it in the narrative, but you can also see when he described in Deltarune exactly what was happening. I think for other developers, we might not know it, but what they put in the new games, what they put in the remakes, and yes, remakes are still good, is that they put the things that are nostalgic to them. And we can appreciate that. You don't get to talk. Your opinion doesn't matter right now.
I think it's hard to achieve that, especially talking about Toby Hawk's and Undertale. I mean, when you're dealing with a game that Matt Pat gave to the Pope, I mean, the brevity of that, how in the world can I possibly live up to that? And I think there is an area within expectancy violation where if I frame it that way to my community, that may be a way in terms of audience analysis to be able to ease into it a little bit more after a really big hit. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello there.
Hello.
You guys did a really amazing job. Thank you for that. I had a question, and it can be just, personal experience or the science behind things, but I have a 7-year-old nephew, and he loves Super Smash Brothers and Pokemon, and has just started playing Breath of the Wild, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this child is living my childhood, and it's amazing. And I'm curious if there's any science behind, like, nostalgia with people who were there when you experienced it. My brother and I talking about that amazing water temple when we were kids, versus like the nostalgia of someone else who wasn't there that like brings up those feelings of nostalgia. So again, it can be personal experiences or science, but for me it feels different living that with my brother who was there versus living that with my nephew who wasn't, and now I get to explain why Pikachu is amazing.
Oh, Dr. Kowert.
Yeah, that's definitely different. I mean, when I think about my nostalgic memories, it is playing with my brother, for sure. And it's the memories that we have that we created in a social environment are far more visceral than it's almost like you're having vicarious nostalgia when you are sitting there witnessing it with your nephew. I think that the embeddedness and the effects, the psychological effects of the nostalgia are different. How exactly, I can't tell you. There is definitely research that has looked at it between vicarious nostalgia and like personal reflective nostalgia. The former personal reflective nostalgia being more of a psychological resource than the other.
Well, actually, the one thing that I was thinking is sort of a parasocial. You're imagining yourself sort of as the kid within the same age, and sort of applying your perception of where you were versus where they are now, and thinking of the relationship you build around that media source or whatever you're playing at.
But and sort of keep in mind, like, when you did it with your brother, y'all were the protagonists, right? Now you're a tertiary character watching the hero play the game, and it's your 7-year-old, nephew, right? It's a little different, but
It's a little different, but to be fair, my brother's older, so I was always watching because we played RPGs.
Same.
So I wasn't the hero, I was the cheerleader.
I mean, I think of this as also from like a parenting standpoint. 3 of us up here are parents at the time. When we all have children, we play with them. And we want them to experience that same thing that we experienced at that time. That visceral reaction, the feel, the pull to the game. And sometimes the kids are like, why did you play this? And you're like, I'm just gonna go in the corner.
oh, we try to force it. We're like, how about that sword? Oh, and the kids like, it's pretty cool.
It's like the gatekeepers, yeah. I do mention that there are several studies that talk about that specifically within, they actually talk about Pokemon Go quite a lot within nostalgia, and that goes back to Dr. Kowert, your historical versus personal. Another resource is Jamie Madigan's book that he mentioned specifically within, he mentioned social aspects. And what was that, getting gamers?
Getting gamers.
Yeah, it's fantastic. that's also a good resource to use.
Good
Thank
question.
you guys very much. Also, Damon, you just turned 8. I am so sorry I messed that up.
Whoa, yes.
You're in trouble now.
Hello.
Hey.
Thanks for the talk. It was really interesting. But throughout the entire thing, so I grew up playing Resident Evil.
Nice.
Just recently released RE2 Remake.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not alone.
But like I have so many friends that hate the remake because they wanted it to be the exact same with just updated graphics. But I felt like the remake was more capturing the spirit of the game, not just recreating it. So maybe personal opinion or
I think
maybe scientists for this.
This isn't an expectancy violation. This is why people have been clamoring for a remake of Final Fantasy VII, and they were like, no, we are not touching those memories because we know how embedded they are, right? Isn't this?
And that swings back to what I was thinking earlier during the first question of like, maybe that's what's nostalgic to the developers. Which is, there's a feel for the game and then there's just rebooting with another engine. But nostalgia is so various from person to person. I haven't played that one personally. I have a love-hate relationship with scary games. I will watch scary movies all day, but I really think it's about kind of what we want it to be in our head long before we ever get there. This is why people say the same thing about getting married. Like, you expect so many things, and you're like, I'm not gonna cry, and then you get up on stage and you bawl like a baby, and that's okay. But it's just, we all have really strong feelings about it because we have an attachment. We enjoyed that game. We created identity around that game. We became who we were during that game. And then when you go back to it, and it's not exactly what you expected, maybe that even brings up some, I mean, maybe it's a shrink in me. I'm gonna hedge that comment and just say, like, the shrink in me gets curious.
But also, it's different things for different people. Some
Right.
people want a straight remake,
Yes,
and some people want just a thread of it, like we have with
a flavor.
And age and time since the first memory is everything, right? Whether it's going to be expectation of the old or expectation of the new, right? Again, that sort of pain and transition. Yeah.
I think we've got time for one more question, and again, please feel free to stick around and talk to us. We're happy to keep answering questions afterwards.
But just while that one, whoever hacked it and put Thomas the Train in there was my hero. I'm just saying, having Thomas the Train bust through a door and you're like, oh, that's not scary, and then he just rolls over you like this and you die.
And his eyeballs keep going left and right.
Yeah, and it just like smile on your face, you're like, this is great. Go ahead, sorry.
Do you think that the need to innovate overshadows like the idea of nostalgia? So what I mean is that there are older games that do like hold against like time. So like a lot of people reference like Donkey Kong Country 2, Mario 3, Super Mario World, some Mega Man games, stuff like that. And a lot of people like them because they're simple, they're to the point, even to where now we're making, Super Mario Maker. It's make your own level, hold right, get to the goal. And like these ideas are very simple. But do you think that like there's such a need to innovate that we forget, about these simple concepts that make games good, basically?
Well, yeah, I think you could actually look at the movie industry as one model of how nostalgia kind of gets mocked, or gets modeled. That if we have the technology to retell different stories, and the connection between movies and games is still based a little bit in narrative. So if I have the ability to use CGIs, I can tell these stories over and over again. And now that I've got a processor that's more powerful than anything that the Apollo had versus what we had like in the 2600 or an NES, that if there's a market for it and I have the technology to do it, I'm going to redo it.
I think it'd be good if we all have in us sort of this own set obligation of being both a historian and an explorer, and really perseverating on the past and getting stuck in the past to the point it harms you, or being so caught up in the future that you can't be grateful for things that have happened. On both sides, it can be problematic. So it's the balance.
I also think it's unprecedented because we are experiencing where a generation that are the native individuals to both the internet and video games are becoming adults and creators and are generating new content and historic content and documenting that. I mean, think about the way that historically over like the grand span of human creation, like they would have storytellers through every single generation, and now we are opening the floor for literally anyone to be a storyteller. So I think it's important to also acknowledge that this is a different way to do that, and also innovation is a way to revolutionize it.
We are out of time. Thank you so much for
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.